I never expected my sister to show up at Thanksgiving dinner with the police on speed dial, but looking back, I should have seen it coming. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and at 32, I was living in my late grandmother's Victorian house on Maple Street, the same house that had just become the center of a family war. The morning started peacefully enough. I'd spent hours preparing the turkey, following Grandma Rose's recipe card to the letter. The familiar scent of sage and thyme filled the kitchen, bringing back memories of watching her cook when I was little. Back then, she let me help knead the stuffing mixture, her weathered hands guiding my small ones. Cooking is love made visible, she'd always say, her blue eyes twinkling. Now, 3 months after her passing, I was hosting my first Thanksgiving in my home. I'd invited the whole family, hoping to maintain our traditions despite Grandma's absence. Mom and Dad had accepted, along with my younger sister Jessica and her husband Tom. My Aunt Patricia and Uncle George were coming too. Even my cousin Emma had promised to drive up from Boston. The dining room table, Grandma's prized mahogany piece, was set with her best china, the delicate gold-rimmed plates she'd only use for special occasions. I'd polished the silver candlesticks until they gleamed and arranged fall flowers in her crystal vase. Everything had to be perfect. At 2 p.m., Mom and Dad arrived first, bringing their signature green bean casserole. "The house looks lovely, Sarah," Mom said, but there was tension in her voice. She'd been acting strange ever since the will reading, barely meeting my eyes when we talked. Dad just nodded, setting down the casserole before retreating to the living room. He'd always been quiet, but this was different. Something was off. Aunt Patricia and Uncle George arrived next, followed by Emma. They were polite but distant, clustering together in the living room, speaking in hushed tones that stopped whenever I entered. By 3 p.m., everyone was there, except Jessica and Tom. The turkey was ready, the sides were warming, and the pumpkin pie, also Grandma's recipe, was cooling on the counter. "Should we call Jessica?" Mom asked, checking her phone for the 10th time. "Let's give her a few more minutes," I replied, trying to keep my voice light. You know how traffic can be. At 3:30, just as I was about to suggest we start without them, the front door burst open. Jessica stormed in, her face flushed with anger, Tom trailing behind her, looking uncomfortable. But they weren't alone. 2 police officers stood on my front porch. "Get out of Grandma's house, you manipulative witch," Jessica screamed, her voice echoing through the foyer. The family gathered in the doorway between the living room and the entrance hall, their faces a mix of shock and something else. Anticipation. "Jessie, what are you doing?" I asked, my heart pounding. "Why are there police officers outside?" "Don't Jessie me," she thrust her phone in my face. "I've got the police on speed dial. This is Grandma's house, and you're trespassing." The officers shifted uncomfortably on the porch but didn't enter. Jessica continued her tirade, her voice getting louder with each word. "You manipulated Grandma when she was sick, made her change her will. This house should have been split between all of us, not just handed to you." I looked around at my family's faces. No one spoke up in my defense. Even Mom and Dad stood silent, avoiding my gaze. "Is this what you all think?" I asked quietly. "That I manipulated Grandma?" Aunt Patricia stepped forward. "We know you spent a lot of time with Mom in her last month, Sarah. Always here, always alone with her. It's suspicious." "Suspicious?" I repeated, my voice cracking. "I was here because she needed help. Where were all of you?" "We were busy." Jessica shot back. "Some of us have children to take care of. We couldn't just drop everything like you did." I felt a calm settling over me, the kind that comes when you realize everything you feared is actually happening. "You want to know the truth about those last months?" I walked to Grandma's study, my study now, aware of the family following behind me. The leather chair creaked as I sat down, opening the bottom drawer of the desk. Jessica stood in the doorway, arms crossed, the phone still clutched in her hand. "Go ahead, call the police in," I said, pulling out a thick manila envelope. "But first, let's discuss where everyone was when Grandma needed help with her medication 4 times a day." I removed a stack of papers from the envelope. "Let's talk about who was here when she needed rides to chemotherapy, who cooked her meals when she couldn't stand long enough to use the stove, who read to her when her eyes got too tired." "We all helped," Jessica protested, but her voice wavered. "Did you?" I spread the papers on the desk. Because I have here a log of every doctor's appointment from the last year, every medication schedule, every therapy session. And do you know what's interesting? Apart from me, there's only one other name that appears regularly in these records. The room was silent now. Even Jessica had stopped shouting. Nurse Martinez, I continued. The hospice nurse who came 3 times a week. That's it. No Jessica. No Aunt Patricia. No one else. That doesn't prove anything, Jessica said, but she lowered her phone. You're right, I agreed. It doesn't. But this might. I pulled out another document, Grandma's notarized will, dated 2 months before her death. Grandma didn't change her will when she was sick. She changed it 6 months before her diagnosis, when she was still playing tennis twice a week and hosting her book club. I stood up, holding the will. Would you like me to read it? She was very specific about her reasons. Mom stepped forward. Sarah, we don't need to. Oh, I think we do, I interrupted, since Jessica brought the police and all. I cleared my throat and began to read. I, Rose Eleanor Mitchell, being of sound mind and body, hereby declare this to be my last will and testament. To my granddaughter Sarah Mitchell, I leave my house at 247 Maple Street, where she has lived with me for the past 2 years, helping to maintain my independence and bringing joy to my final chapters. Jessica's face had gone pale. I continued reading. I make this bequest not only out of love but out of recognition for Sarah's sacrifice and dedication. When I suggested selling the house 2 years ago because maintaining it had become too much, Sarah was the one who offered to move in. She gave up her apartment in the city, took a lower-paying job that allowed her to work remotely, and has since invested both time and money in keeping this house and me going. I looked up at my family. Should I continue? There's quite a bit about how she tried to invite everyone over for weekly dinners, but people were always too busy. There's a lovely paragraph about how many times she called each of you during her last year. That's enough, Dad said quietly. It was the first time he'd spoken since arriving. I placed the will back on the desk. If you'd like to call the police in, go ahead. I have the original will, witness statements, and 2 years' worth of documentation showing exactly who was here for Grandma and who wasn't. I also have receipts for every repair, every upgrade, and every bill I've paid since moving in. What do you have, Jessica? My sister's hand, still holding the phone, dropped to her side. Behind her, the police officers had already started walking back to their car, clearly realizing this was a family matter, not a legal one. You could have told us, Jessica whispered. Told you what? That Grandma was lonely? That she needed help? She did tell you. She told all of you. You were just too busy to listen. Looking around the room at my family's faces, shame on Mom's, anger fading to embarrassment on Jessica's, discomfort on everyone else's, I felt suddenly tired. The turkey would be getting cold, the sides congealing in their serving dishes. I think, I said slowly, that Thanksgiving dinner is over. Please see yourselves out. One by one, they filed out of the study. Mom paused in the doorway. Sarah, we didn't know. Yes, you did, I replied quietly. You just didn't want to know. After they left, I sat in Grandma's chair, my chair, for a long time, surrounded by the papers that proved what I'd always known. Sometimes the people who scream the loudest about family are the ones who show up the least. Finally, I got up and went to the kitchen. The turkey was cold, but I carved off a slice anyway. Sitting at Grandma's kitchen table, my kitchen table, I could almost hear her voice. Cooking is love made visible. Yes, Grandma, I whispered to the empty room. But so is showing up when it matters. The days following the disastrous Thanksgiving dinner were eerily quiet. I donated most of the untouched food to the local homeless shelter, keeping only Grandma's pumpkin pie for myself. Each night, I'd have a small slice, sitting in her favorite armchair, remembering how she'd laugh at my attempts to recreate her perfect crust. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from family members, but I couldn't bring myself to read them. Jessica had crossed a line by bringing police officers to my door, and the others had stood by, complicit in her accusation. The betrayal cut deep, especially from Mom. On Sunday evening, while I was sorting through some of Grandma's old photos in the living room, the doorbell rang. Through the stained glass panels, I could see Mom's silhouette. Sarah? Her voice was muffled through the door. Please, can we talk? I considered pretending I wasn't home, but Grandma had raised me better than that. Opening the door, I found Mom holding a casserole dish, looking smaller and older than I remembered. I brought your favorite, she said, lifting the dish slightly. Mac and cheese with a crispy breadcrumb topping. It's actually Jessica's favorite, I corrected her. I'm lactose intolerant, remember? Mom's face fell. Oh, I didn't? No. Or remember? I stepped aside to let her in, more out of habit than welcome. There seems to be a lot of that going around lately. She followed me to the kitchen, setting the casserole on the counter. The room still smelled faintly of Thanksgiving dinner, despite my best efforts to air it out. I've been doing a lot of thinking, Mom began, perching uncertainly on one of the kitchen stools. About what you said. About the documentation you showed us. And? I started making tea, keeping my hands busy to steady my nerves. Grandma's china teapot gleamed on the shelf, the one she taught me to make proper English tea in, explaining how the pot must be warmed first. I failed her, Mom said quietly. I failed both of you. I paused in measuring the loose tea leaves. You did. She was my mother, and I got caught up in my own life. Book club, garden club, the charity committee at church. I told myself she was fine, that she had you. She did have me, I said, pouring hot water into the pot to warm it. But she shouldn't have needed to rely only on me. She was your mother. Aunt Patricia's mother. Jessica's grandmother, too. I know, Mom's voice cracked. When she got sick, I couldn't handle it. Seeing her so weak, so different from the strong woman who raised me. I made excuses not to visit, told myself she needed rest, that too many visitors would tire her out. I emptied the warming water and added fresh tea leaves. She asked for you, you know. Every time she had a good day, she'd say, maybe we should call your mother, have her over for lunch. But after the 5th or 6th rejection, she stopped asking. Tears rolled down Mom's cheeks. I didn't know. 3 minutes, I said, watching the tea steep. That's how long it takes to make a proper cup of tea. Grandma taught me that. She also taught me that it takes just 20 minutes to visit someone you love. 10 if you're busy. Even 5 minutes on the phone is better than nothing. The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the silence between us. When the tea was ready, I poured 2 cups, adding milk to Mom's. She'd never learned to drink it plain like Grandma, and I did. Jessica's devastated, Mom said, wrapping her hands around the warm cup. She never meant for things to go so far. She brought police officers to my house on Thanksgiving, I replied flatly. She accused me of manipulating Grandma, of stealing the house. Those aren't actions that happen in the heat of the moment. She planned that. She was hurt. Hurt. I set my cup down hard enough that tea sloshed over the rim. What right does she have to be hurt? She visited Grandma twice in her last year. Twice. Both times for less than an hour because she had yoga class or the kids had soccer practice. Sarah? No, Mom. You don't get to defend her. Not about this. I grabbed a cloth to wipe up the spilled tea. Do you know what Grandma said to me the night before she died? Mom shook her head, tears still flowing. She said, Sarah, don't let them make you feel guilty for being here. Don't let them turn their absence into your crime. I didn't understand what she meant then. I do now. We never meant to make you feel. But you did. You all did. Every time you made excuses for not visiting, every time you asked me to handle something because you were too busy, you sent the message that caring for Grandma was my job alone. And now you're angry that she acknowledged that in her will. Mom stared into her teacup. When did you move in with her? I remember you said you were thinking about it, but suddenly you were just here. 2 years ago, after I found her trying to clean the gutters by herself. She was on a ladder, Mom, at 78, because no one would return her calls about helping with house maintenance. Oh God. Yeah, so I moved in. Transferred to a remote position that paid less but gave me flexible hours. Started working from the sunroom so I could keep an eye on her. Did you know she tried to pay me rent? Mom looked up, surprised. She did. Every month, she tried to give me money for room and board. I put it all in a savings account instead, used it to fix the roof last spring, repair the furnace in winter. All those things she kept asking for help with that everyone was too busy to handle. I had no idea. That's the problem, Mom. You didn't want to have any idea. None of you did. It was easier to pretend everything was fine, that Grandma was managing on her own. Then when she got sick, I had to stop fighting back tears of my own. When she got sick, You stepped up, Mom finished quietly. Someone had to. The cancer treatments were brutal. She needed help remembering which medications to take when. Someone to hold her hair back when she got sick, to make sure she was eating enough, drinking enough, to sit with her through the long nights when the pain was too much. Why didn't you ask for help? I did. I called everyone. Left messages, sent texts. Jessica said the kids were too young to see Grandma like that. Aunt Patricia was always traveling. You were always busy with your committees. After a while, I stopped asking. Mom set her teacup down, the china clinking softly. I've made a terrible mistake, haven't I? We all make choices, Mom. Every day we choose what and who we prioritize. You all made your choices, Grandma made hers, and now I'm making mine. What does that mean? I stood up, taking our cups to the sink. It means I need time. Time to process what happened at Thanksgiving. Time to grieve for Grandma without managing everyone else's guilt. Time to decide if I want to maintain relationships with people who thought I was capable of manipulating a dying woman. We're family, Sarah. Family shows up, Mom. Family answers the phone. Family doesn't bring police officers to Thanksgiving dinner. Mom stood, smoothing her skirt with trembling hands. What can I do to make this right? I don't know if you can. I answered honestly. But you can start by taking that casserole with you when you leave. And maybe, if you really want to make things right, you can spend some time thinking about why you all found it easier to believe I manipulated Grandma than to face the truth about your own choices. I walked her to the door, watching as she got into her car. As she drove away, I thought about all the times Grandma had stood in this same doorway, watching her daughter leave, waiting for a visit that would never be long enough, or soon enough. Back in the kitchen, I made myself a fresh cup of tea, this time using Grandma's special occasion cups, the ones with the hand-painted roses. Sitting in her chair, my chair, I raised the cup in a silent toast. You were right, Grandma, I whispered. About everything. Outside, the first snow of winter began to fall, coating the world in clean, forgiving white. But some things, I was learning, were harder to forgive than others. And some cups of tea needed to be finished alone. A week after Mom's visit, I was in Grandma's study, finally tackling the mountain of paperwork she'd left behind. The room still smelled of her favorite lavender hand cream, and sometimes, when I sat at her desk, I could almost pretend she was just in the other room, making her afternoon tea. The bottom drawer of her filing cabinet contained decades of carefully organized documents, birth certificates, insurance policies, and, to my surprise, a stack of letters tied with a faded blue ribbon. They were all addressed to me, dated over the last 2 years. My hands trembled as I opened the first one. My dearest Sarah, it began in Grandma's elegant handwriting. If you're reading this, I'm no longer here to tell you these things myself. There's so much you need to know, especially about why I changed my will. I settled deeper into the leather chair, my heart pounding. Your sister's visit today troubled me deeply, the letter continued. She came asking for money, $50,000 to be exact. Said it was for a down payment on a bigger house. When I explained that my savings were needed for potential medical expenses, she grew angry. She mentioned that you were living here rent-free and suggested I was playing favorites. I remembered that day. I'd come home from work to find Grandma unusually quiet, but she'd never mentioned Jessica's visit. What Jessica doesn't know, the letter went on, is that I've been keeping records of everything, the times family members visit, the excuses they make, the requests for money. Call it an old woman's paranoia, but I sensed this day would come. The next letter was dated 3 months later. Your mother came by today, Sarah. She stayed exactly 12 minutes, just long enough to ask if I considered selling the house and moving into that retirement community she'd mentioned. When I said I was happy here with you, she suggested you might be taking advantage of my generosity. I didn't tell her about the home repairs you've paid for, or the savings account where you've been putting my attempted rent payments. Let them think what they want. My throat tightened as I moved to the next letter. The diagnosis came today. Cancer. Stage 3. The doctor gave me options, but all I could think about was how to tell the family. You were with me, of course, you're always with me. But when I called your mother, she was too busy with her garden club meeting to talk. Patricia was in Europe. Jessica had yoga. Only you sat there, holding my hand, asking about treatment options. Tears blurred my vision as I read letter after letter. Grandma had documented everything. The lonely holidays before I moved in, the unanswered phone calls, the constant requests for money from family members who never had time to visit. The final letter was dated just a week before she passed away. My precious girl, the end is near, and I need you to know something. The house was always going to be yours. Not because you moved in, not because you cared for me, but because you were the only one who saw me as a person, not an obligation or a bank account. Your sister will be angry. Your mother will be hurt. They'll accuse you of things that aren't true. But in my bedside table, you'll find a record of every visit, every call, every financial request. I've had my lawyer document everything. Not because I don't trust you, but because I know you'll need protection from their guilt when it turns to anger. You gave up so much to be here with me, Sarah. Your apartment, your job in the city, your social life. But you never complained, never made me feel like a burden. You brought life back into this old house. Filled it with laughter and love when I thought those days were over. They'll tell you I changed my will because you manipulated me. The truth is, I changed it because they showed me who they really were, and so did you. Remember what I taught you about tea, how the best cups are the ones shared with people who choose to be there. You chose to be here, day after day, through the good times and the hard ones. The house is yours, dear heart. Not because you earned it, though you did, but because you're the only one who truly loves it, and me, for more than its monetary value. Stay strong. The truth will come out, and when it does, remember that their anger is really guilt in disguise. All my love, Grandma. I sat there for a long time, letters scattered across the desk as snow continued to fall outside. Finally, I reached for my phone and with shaking hands, took photos of each letter. Then I opened my email and began to write. Dear family, I've discovered some letters Grandma left behind. I'm attaching photos of them all. Before you respond, before you make more accusations or bring more police officers to my door, read them. Read about how she felt, what she saw, what she knew. Read about Jessica's demand for $50,000. Read about Mom's 12-minute visits and suggestions to sell the house. Read about the missed calls, the ignored pleas for help, the lonely holidays. Read it all. Then, if you still think I manipulated her, if you still think I stole what was rightfully yours, take these letters to a lawyer. Show them the documentation Grandma kept. Let them see her records of visits, calls, and financial requests. But if, after reading these, you feel something else, something that feels like shame or regret or guilt, know that Grandma forgave you. She told me that too in one of her letters. She understood that life gets busy, that priorities shift, that it's easier to look away than to watch someone you love grow old and sick. She forgave you. I'm working on it. Sarah. I hit send before I could change my mind, then walked to the kitchen to make tea. As I waited for the water to boil, my phone began to buzz with incoming messages. I turned it face down on the counter. Some conversations needed to wait until the tea was properly steeped. Grandma taught me that too. Standing at the kitchen window, watching snow blanket the garden she loved so much, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The truth was out now, in Grandma's own words. Whatever happened next, I knew I'd honored her wishes and protected her legacy. The kettle whistled, and I reached for her favorite teapot, the one with the hand-painted roses. Outside, the world was quiet, peaceful under its blanket of snow. Inside, in this house that was now truly mine, I finally felt at peace too. Winter melted into spring, and with it came changes I never expected. After I sent Grandma's letters, the family's radio silence was deafening for about a week. Then, one by one, they started responding. Jessica was first, surprisingly. Not with a text or email, but with a small package delivered to my door. Inside was a framed photo of Grandma and me from Christmas 2 years ago, both of us laughing as we decorated cookies in the kitchen. With it was a handwritten note. I found this while going through old photos. You both look so happy. I was jealous of that happiness, of the relationship you had with her. It was easier to believe you manipulated her than to admit I chose not to be there. I'm sorry, not just for Thanksgiving, but for everything. I placed the photo on the mantel, next to Grandma's collection of antique teacups. Mom's response came in the form of a thick envelope containing her resignation letters from various committees and a note. Making time for what really matters now. For who really matters. Aunt Patricia sent an email, short but sincere. Your grandmother was right about everything. I'm ashamed it took her letters to make me see that. But the most surprising change came from Dad. One Saturday morning in April, as I was tending to Grandma's beloved rose garden, he showed up with a toolbox and work gloves. "The gutters need cleaning," he said simply. I thought, well, I thought I could help. We worked in silence for an hour, him on the ladder, me holding it steady. Finally, he spoke again. I read the letters 3 times. The part about her trying to clean these gutters herself. I couldn't sleep for days thinking about it, about what could have happened if you hadn't found her. Dad? No, let me finish. I was a coward, Sarah. It was easier to stay quiet, to let your mother and sister run things, to pretend everything was fine. But nothing was fine, was it? I handed him another garbage bag for the leaves and debris. No, it wasn't. "I'd like to help now," he said. "Not to make up for before. I know that's impossible, but because this house, your house, deserves to be cared for. Like you care for her." After that, Dad started coming by regularly. Every weekend, he'd show up with his toolbox, ready to tackle whatever needed fixing. We didn't talk much, but somehow the silence became comfortable. As spring bloomed into summer, Grandma's garden came alive with the flowers we planted together during her last good days. The roses she loved so much burst into brilliant color, their fragrance filling the air just as it used to when she would cut them for her bedside table. One evening, as I sat on the porch swing she'd insisted on keeping despite its creaky chains, Mom stopped by. She carried 2 teacups from her own china set. "I've been taking lessons," she said, setting up a small folding table. Proper English tea, the way Mom used to make it. I watched as she warmed the pot, measured the leaves, and timed the steeping. Her movements were careful, deliberate, just like Grandma's had been. 3 minutes, I said softly. 3 minutes, she agreed. She always said you couldn't rush a proper cup of tea, just like you can't rush healing. The tea she poured was perfect, strong, clear, with just the right amount of complexity, just like Grandma used to make. "I miss her," Mom said, cradling her cup. "Every day, I think of things I wish I'd said, moments I wish I'd been here for." "Me too. But you were here. You gave her those moments, even when the rest of us didn't." She reached over and squeezed my hand. "Thank you for that. And thank you for sharing her letters. They hurt to read, but we needed that hurt to heal." As summer faded into autumn again, the house settled into a new rhythm. Dad fixing things on weekends, Mom stopping by with tea and staying for actual conversations. Even Jessica, slowly, cautiously, beginning to visit. Not asking for anything, just sitting in Grandma's garden, getting to know her sister again. The house felt different now, still filled with Grandma's presence, but lighter somehow. As if, by sharing her letters, by letting the truth be known, I fulfilled some final wish of hers. 1 year after that fateful Thanksgiving, I hosted dinner again. This time, when the family gathered, there were no police officers, no accusations, no demands. Just people who had learned the hard way that love isn't about ownership or inheritance. It's about showing up, being present, choosing to be there. As we sat around Grandma's table, my table, I raised my glass in a toast. To Grandma Rose, I said, who taught us that it's never too late to learn how to make a proper cup of tea or to learn how to be a proper family. And somewhere I could almost hear her laughing, saying as she always did, "Love, like tea, takes time to brew just right."